the casket would be sealed. Why would Mississippi want a sealed casket?
That day was, am I going to be the only male in this bridal shower? And we laughed about it. I said, oh, of course he was.
They're like marauding, at the boys and attacking them, and to a point where...
In Cape Town, there was a nightclub incident, I believe, and you saw black people, coloreds.
I wouldn't care what any man was charged with, period.
Number 5, Emmett Till. In the summer of 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till went to visit his great-uncle and cousins in the small town of Money, Mississippi. Till was an African-American teenager who had grown up in Chicago, a fun-loving prankster who loved to make people laugh, according to one friend. Till was unprepared for the rigidly maintained racial order in the South, where blacks were expected to display constant deference to whites or else face violent reprisal. 3 days after he arrived in Mississippi, Till entered Bryant's grocery store to buy a pack of bubble gum. Carolyn Bryant, the white woman who was working behind the counter, alleged that Till had wolf-whistled at her, grabbed her around the waist, and uttered obscenities. More than 50 years later, Bryant admitted that she fabricated this story and lied under oath about their encounter.
It was hard to see her heart broken.
She could touch, and finally got them engaged to bring the child home.
Myself, we walked up to the casket, and it was covered with glass.
Crowbar, give me whatever. What can they do to me? They've taken my son.
Bryant told her husband, Roy Bryant, that Till had made intimate advances toward her. 4 days later, he and his half-brother, J.W. Millam, kidnapped Till from his great-uncle's house in the middle of the night. They beat the 14-year-old boy mercilessly, gouged out one of his eyes, and then shot him. They tied his body to a large industrial fan and dumped him in the nearby Tallahatchie River. When Till's corpse was salvaged from the river 3 days later, he was recognizable only by the ring he wore, which had belonged to his father. His remains were sent to his mother with the coffin nailed shut. It's likely that Till's slaying, like those of so many other African Americans during the Jim Crow era, would have gone virtually unnoticed if his mother, Mamie Bradley, had not made the brave decision to hold an open casket funeral. Jet magazine published pictures of Bradley with her son's mutilated corpse, which excited outrage and horror from the broader public.
Who was behind the counter the afternoon that Emmett Till and his cousins came in to buy some candy.
I'm sure what's going to happen.
And you knew that in Mississippi, at that time, 1950.
Sunday morning, about 2:30, I heard a voice at the door.
Number 4, James Byrd Jr. James Byrd Jr. was born in Beaumont, Texas, one of 9 children to Stella and James Byrd Sr. In 1967, Byrd, who was African American, graduated from the last segregated class at Jasper's Row High School. Byrd went on to marry and have 3 children. In the pre-dawn hours of June 7, 1998, something terrible would happen. Byrd spent the day drinking and socializing with friends and family in Jasper, across town from his apartment. As he was walking home that Saturday, Barry, Brewer, and King offered him a ride, and he accepted. The 3 men had been driving around Jasper in Barry's pickup truck for much of the evening, drinking beer and looking for young women. Instead of taking Byrd home, Barry, Brewer, and King drove east out of Jasper and stopped at a small clearing in the woods. Investigators believe there was a fight in the clearing because of the upturned grass, disturbed dirt, and broken beer bottle, which were consistent with signs of a struggle.
It was in that pickup truck the night that James Byrd Jr. was dragged to his death. Defense lawyers have not said.
Been dismembered, and it's very sickening.
And from the beginning, it was important for Jasper to say that, hey, we're not all like.
In the clearing, the 3 men beat Byrd, and Brewer sprayed Byrd's face with black paint. After the beating, Byrd was chained by the ankles to the back of Barry's pickup. The truck traveled along the dirt trail and turned onto the pavement of Huff Creek Road. Byrd was dragged roughly 3 miles. Investigators found Byrd's personal items scattered along the dirt trail and pavement. His body apparently bounced into a ditch on the right side of the road, hitting the ragged edge of a roadside drainage ditch just below the right arm. The impact severed the arm, shoulder, neck, and head from the rest of the body, which continued to be dragged for another mile. King, Barry, and Brewer then dumped James Byrd's mutilated remains in the town's segregated black cemetery and went to a barbecue. Forensic evidence suggests that Byrd had been attempting to keep his head up and an autopsy suggested that Byrd was alive for much of the dragging and died only after his head, shoulder, and right arm were severed when his body hit the culvert. State law enforcement officials and Jasper's district attorney determined that since King and Brewer were well-known white supremacists, the slaying was classified as a hate crime. After 3 separate trials, all 3 men were found guilty of capital slaying. Brewer and King were sentenced to their demise. They were punished in 2011 and 2019 respectively, and Berry received life in prison.
Pride of the precious memory of watch his 3 children grow up to be productive citizens. James' legacy continues to be one of peace and nonviolence, because when we have open dialogue, it helps to overcome racial prejudice. As if he was just, during the trial, he showed no interest in the trial. He seemed to have shown no interest in him.
Number 3, South Africa resort attack. A violent attack by a group of white men on 2 black teenagers at a resort pool in South Africa in December 2022 sparked widespread outrage, reviving images from the ugly days of apartheid and serving as a stinging reminder of the country's unresolved racial tensions. Cell phone footage of the attack, which the teenagers said started when they were told the pool was for white people only, spread widely on social media. It showed scenes that could have been from decades ago, when apartheid-era laws restricted South Africa's black majority from using public facilities designated for white people. Footage shows one man delivering an open-hand slap to the face of one black teenager, another graying white man casually holding a cigarette as he tugs the hair of the other black youth, and one of the men wrapping the taller youth in a headlock and pulling him into the pool, seemingly trying to submerge the teenager's head underwater.
We please as parents come and intervene because they are being prevented from swimming by the pool was reserved for them because they are booked here. So we came in and explained that they were actually booked here as well. So the matter was settled. But as we are just leaving the boys of them, and as things stand now, the case is being investigated.
Brian Nakedi, a former underground fighter against apartheid, said his 18-year-old son, Gokong Nakedi, was one of the teenagers attacked at the pool in Bloemfontein, a city about 4 hours south of Johannesburg. Both denied online claims that the youths had provoked the fight. The police announced that they had arrested and charged 3 white men, Johan Nel, 33, and Jan Stefanus van der Westhuizen, 47, and a 3rd suspect whose name was not released. The apartheid may have fallen some 30 years ago, but the legacy of racial segregation and violence still lives in the hearts of white supremacists in the country.
Great Voortrekkers, who are the pilgrims of Southern Africa, the stories they tell about the pilgrims here in Manifest Destiny later in South Africa. I said I like to say that white people really feel threatened in South Africa, and those who are deep white supremacists, white people, mostly adults, pushing back these young black people. But here's where you come to the problem, Robert, and I'll end with this.
About apartheid specifically is the idea of having whites only and the idea of having under Jim Crow. I'd really used a lot of America's racism against its black folks.
Number 2, prison attack. Security footage leaked from the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville in 2019 showed an unbelievable display of racism. 4 black inmates were chained to a table and then knifed by a white man. As information was released, it turned out that the men in the video were Shamika Pugh, Maurice Lee, Dantes Hollis, and Daryl Pascal. They were strip-searched by the officers before they were let out of their cells for recreational time and handcuffed to a table. Renke, identified as a member of the white supremacist group the Aryan Brotherhood, was allegedly not strip-searched before he was handcuffed to a nearby table. Guards also allegedly gave Renke a key or knew or should have known that Renke had a key or something similar to slip out of his cuffs.
Bars. And some guy, he like, man, it don't feel right that they ran like, pretty much if you're black, you're gonna have a hard time there. And from ripping out the handcuffs.
He could have, when he got free, ran the other direction.
Renke then pulled a homemade blade out of his sock before he began to attack the men. The officers, identified by the last names Fay and Dalton, then reportedly laughed behind a closed and locked door, with one allegedly saying, "We should just let them perish." Hollis was able to slip out of his handcuffs and tackled Renke, which is when the guards arrived on the scene. The men were all visibly bleeding by this time. A lawsuit was launched after this incident. Pugh and Lee, 2 of the inmates who filed the lawsuit, say officers didn't strip search Renke as required and didn't provide first aid to the bleeding inmates for more than 10 minutes. Renke has denied the officers arranged the attack, but said they condoned it. Reviews of what happened found that guards followed prison policies and procedures, and no officers were disciplined. One of the inmates' attorneys, Solomon Radner, argued that the guards' conduct violated constitutional protection against cruel and unusual punishment. Number 1. Howard Beach attack. On the night of December 19, 1986, a group of young black men was driving through Howard Beach, a predominantly white neighborhood in Queens, New York. Little did they know that their night out would turn into a nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As they were driving, their car broke down, leaving them stranded in an unfamiliar and unfriendly environment. With no other option, they decided to leave the car and start walking, hoping to find a way to get back home. It was then that they encountered a group of white teenagers who were out for a night of drinking and mischief. What happened next is now etched in the annals of American history as one of the most horrific racial attacks of the 20th century.
In this neighborhood.
Okay, but there is a reason, right?
No, I don't think there is a reason for it. If you come in my house and you want to step on me, well, then I'm going to have to step back on you. There is...
No, why not? You know why? Because you got stabbed by a white guy.
Listen, then they should have come out then, because
he wasn't welcome here. All right. So we decided that all of us would come and have some pizza together.
The white teenagers, emboldened by alcohol and their own prejudices, began to taunt and harass the black men. Racial slurs were hurled, and the situation quickly escalated into a full-blown attack. The black men tried to defend themselves, but they were vastly outnumbered and outmatched. They were beaten with baseball bats and tree branches, and one of them, Michael Griffith, was chased onto a busy highway and hit by a car. He perished instantly, leaving his friends in shock and disbelief. After the attack, the police launched an investigation to identify and arrest the perpetrators. They eventually arrested 4 white teenagers: John Lester, Scott Kern, Jason Ladone, and Michael Perrone. In December 1987, the judge convicted the 4 teenagers of slaying, attack, and other charges. He sentenced them to prison terms ranging from 5 to 10 years. Thank you for watching our video today, folks, and that's all for today. We'll see you next time